This video is brought to you late by the amazing procrastination efforts of myself trying to ignore the fact that a new university semester was beginning this week. Today we got a more exposition-oriented episode rather than thrilling action, and in most cases I do enjoy the exposition alicization more than the action-based episodes when the anime covers them properly at the very least. Thankfully, this was one of those episodes providing a huge cliffhanger I have been waiting for such a long time, so I can now use Eugeo's hollow realization pictures in the videos without spoiling you. Welcome everyone, it's me Gamerturk, and this is your most accurate source of Sword Art Online information, Alicization Explained, featuring episode 20, Synthesis. As always, timestamps to individual plot points are in the description as well as the pinned comment for easy navigation, but to give you a quick rundown once again with the pace of the anime and the relatively short length of volume 13 Alicization Dividing, we have a pretty accurate episode once more. Aside from the one very obvious change in setting in one of the scenes, which I assume is solely made due to visual fidelity of the scene being more suitable this way for an animated medium, everything was more or less on par with the novels, but we still got things to talk about. If you're new to my Explained series, however, what I do here is essentially provide you all the vital information on characters, events, action, lore from the source material, light novels, things that the anime did not convey properly or just did not have the time to, so you can still see the full picture. But then again, if you want to read the books for yourselves for the amazing experience, Amazon and Book Depository affiliate links are in the description and the knowledge of Stacia awaits you there. And to add, my current giveaway featuring the first 2 volumes of the Sword Art Online Girls Ops spin-off manga can be found in the description and the pinned comment as well, so do check it out for a chance to win. But without further ado, episode 20 covered the remaining parts of volume 13, Alicization Dividing, and completed the contents of the book and did not step into volume 14, Alicization Uniting yet. Yeah, it might surprise you, but when I say the anime was pretty accurate, I really mean it. They ended on the same bit as the novels did, with Kirito and Eugeo lunging towards each other, both using the same skill, Sonic Leap. But we'll get there when we get there. All in all, chapter 11 parts 3 and 4 were adapted this week, so give or take 40 pages without the illustrations, resulting in the high adaptation accuracy we have come to expect at this point in the past few weeks. Our journey begins shortly after Kirito reached the floor 95's Morning Star Lookout, skipping the minor introductory inner monologue, the monologue that was actually answering a question one of you asked before in the comments. As I already said back then, while Underworld processes pain realistically, the pain of Alice's eye exploding was not what knocked Alice unconscious, but rather the shock of doing so. In Underworld, things like pain and fatigue do not affect you the same way they do in real life. However, shock does have a significant effect on the artificial floodlights, as they have a harder time processing these kinds of feelings. Kirito actually wondered for a while if Alice had encountered a similar error to what Rios did back at the academy, but immediately realized that she would be processed as dead at that point if that was the case, which she wasn't, so he knew she was bound to wake up eventually. But this moment really caused Kirito to admire Eugeo even more. He had blown through the seal in much more tragic circumstances, mind you, yet managed to stay conscious to protect those he cared about, which spoke volumes to his mental strength. Unknown to Kirito, that mental strength was drained to its minimal limits as he was busy carrying Alice up, sweating and staining her uniform and getting beaten up by her for it. Skipping some minor banter here between Kirito and Alice, with Alice claiming she had beaten Kirito in their battle, so Eugeo must have definitely lost to Berkuli, and Kirito attempting to interject. Now that they were back on solid ground rather than small metal hooks, it was actually time to search for Eugeo. While Kirito was not aware of a spell who could track individuals, a spell he had used after escaping the prison to locate their swords, that was skipped in the anime back in episode 11, was more than enough to point them at the right direction. After all, Kirito had memorized the object IDs of the blue rose sword and the black one for a reason. WLSS, or DLSS in the Yen Press translation for language purposes, stood for double-edged longsword, single-handed, according to Kirito's assumptions, and the number 703 for the blue rose sword and 102382 for the black one was most certainly their unique key in the database within the category. In simpler terms, blue rose sword that existed as far back as the legends was the 702nd double-edged single-handed longsword in Underworld, while the recently carved the black one was the 102,382nd. And tracking the object ID of the blue rose sword, they went down to the Great Bath of the Central Cathedral only to find it to be completely frozen, a feat even multiple trained sacred arts users wouldn't be able to accomplish with mere arts usage. Based on this alone, Kirito knew Eugeo was definitely alive, but in the meanwhile Alice had found the commander Berkuli as well, which provides us yet more context as to why Berkuli is simply the manliest man, the worthiest waifu of all time. Now you may be wondering as to how Berkuli could snap out of his system-mandated deep freeze, but remember when Chudelkin accused him of holding back against Eugeo? Yes, he was partially referring to the other side of his blade, the memory release function of the time-splitting sword, but that wasn't the only thing Berkuli was holding back against Eugeo. You have already seen him utilize the incarnate blade to bring his sword to his hand, but if that didn't give you the idea, it had been a very long time since Berkuli mastered the concept of incarnation to a certain extent. It was one of the reasons why he was always so calm and collected, even at a point where Eugeo assumed that he was actually killing him. He simply knew more of the world than pretty much everyone else and was very proficient with incarnation to ensure his survival if need be, just like the countless times he used it against the Dark Knights in the Dark Territory over the past 300 years. And with his words, we also get to see his wisdom as well. Much like Miss Azurika back at the academy talking to Eugeo, Berkuli was indeed aware of certain mysteries of the world, including the seal of the right eye itself, thus was not really blindly following the Axiom Church. He served the church not because he truly was forced to, but because he believed at this point in time the church was the only way to ensure peace. Not just within the human realm, mind you, Berkuli as the commander of the Integrity Knights was aware of the increased activity in the Dark Territory, more and more scouting parties, small-scale armies amassing on the other side of the End Mountains, fiercer and fiercer battles he endured the more he got to meet other Dark Knights and their prodigies over the years. Without the Axiom Church and its Integrity Knights, would the humans who practice sword fight as if it was a graceful art show ever be able to fight back against the invaders that were bound to come soon? Probably not. So, long story short, Berkuli was not truly on the side of the Axiom Church. You know, he knew there were many things wrong with it, but he was on the side of humanity and was willing to do everything in his power to protect them, to fight for what he believed to be right. And his final words to Kirito showcased how much he knew about the church's reality. Better hurry before he gets trapped in the labyrinth of his memories. But up next, we have what you may call the Fox and clickbait money shot as Kirito grabs the blue rose sword and looks pretty damn cool for someone looking from the outside. What the anime does not portray, however, is that Kirito feels every single one of his joints cracking under the weight of the second divine weapon and actually holds them in two separate hands, as well as attaches them to the two sides of his hips because he literally can't balance himself otherwise in this case. It's also sad to see that the anime does not include Alice's warnings here, with her mentioning that even if Kirito was able to swing the swords properly, there would be no way to unleash a secret technique or what you may call a sword skill, mainly because there are no known ultimate techniques that can be utilized with dual blades in Underworld. But if you want a, more in-depth explanation with all the intricate details and no future spoilers, mind you, you may want to check my Dual Blades video focusing on Alicization and why it is or it isn't possible to dual wield efficiently in Underworld. The link can be found on the top right icon appearing on your screen right now. But as we move towards the top of the Central Cathedral, we get the one major change featured in this episode. The Senate, featuring all the senators, the faces you saw in the reporting windows all those episodes ago, is showcased as a, very clean and tidy location. However, As you can imagine from the conditions of the senators, that was not really the case in the books. The moment Kirito opened the door, he felt a similar sensation to that of opening the door of a labyrinth boss chamber back in Aincrad. It was pitch black inside the room with small faint purple lights far away somewhere in the distance. Both Kirito and Alice could hear certain sacred arts being chanted, but none of them were generating any elements, so they were not really attack arts. The duo decided to use the darkness to their advantage to sneak close to the senators and take them out one by one. However, as they got closer, they realized the room was stinking terribly, like rotten food. Kirito couldn't see the source of the stench due to the darkness of the room, but it all was revealed the moment a light source appeared very close to them. A purple rectangle, a station window, and the white face looking at it. To be frank, the anime really makes this place look very civil and organized compared to what was extensively explained in the novels. The senators were not really in spacious tubes like they were in the anime, but rather in small boxes that would make you second guess if they even have limbs to begin with. The funnel feeding them was barely accurate and some of the food was just going straight to the ground, which was the source of the stench in the first place. It was so bad that before they heard Chudelkin's voice, Alice even decided to go ahead and take their life as a sign of mercy, but Kirito stopped her despite the fact that even he was unsure if sparing them was truly the correct thing to do. The guy who even spared those who actively hurt him and his loved ones, Kirito, the one who didn't take the lives of Laughing Coffin members unless by accidental self-defense, was now contemplating on taking out the senators as well, forcing into this endless work that made Elevator Chan's calling look like heaven. Kirito knew there was no salvation for these creatures. But in the next room ahead, it was Chudelkin watching the events unfold in Quinella's room on the top floor through his crystal ball and was more jealous than anything that the love of his life was embracing a commoner from the north. He certainly had to prove his worth to the Pontifex and take the place of the boy really soon. But sooner than he could set any of his plans in motion, he was suddenly grabbed strongly by Alice and the dialogue you see in the anime came to be. However, the novels, once again, were much more detailed than the conversation here. Alice, back when she was a child, had refused Chudelkin's order to remove core protection solely by claiming her calling her task decided by the gods to be back at her home, and she simply did not consider Chudelkin to be her superior in any case, or at the very least did not consider Chudelkin to be the proxy of the gods, thus was consciously able to refuse the order. And all Kirito could think of was that those words sounded exactly like something Alice would say. He was once again surprised that he had these thoughts as to how he came to this conclusion despite getting to know Alice just mere hours ago. But right after, he realized one more thing. Chudelkin was surprisingly spouting way too much information, and the only reason could have been that he was buying time for something. But with the crystal orb no longer showcasing any visuals, he had no way of knowing really. All he was hoping for was that Chudelkin would spout the location of Eugeo as a final attempt to stall for more time, but suddenly Alice thrusted her sword into the ball, which bursted into a heavy red smoke. Kirito recognized the method there. There was a monster back in Aincrad. If you hit the monster with anything but a blunt attack, it would remove its skin, puff out smoke, and run away. In the light novels, Kirito actually has swung his sword on instinct at his shadow before he could run away, but only managed to swing the hat off of his head as Chudelkin managed to escape. And in fact, this scene right here was not that of a Yu-Gi-Oh villain arriving via floaty thing in a sinister manner. When they arrived at the top room, Alice recognized it as the room where she had woken up as an apprentice Integrity Knight. Before she was taken to the lower floors by Berkuli via a floating platform like the elevator chants, she remembered the administrator using a similar platform to go up instead. Luckily, they had heard the start of the command Chudelkin had used, generate luminous element. Alice simply generated 10 elements and randomly threw them towards the ceiling, one of which actually activated the platform and lowered it to the floor. As both Kirito and Alice were about to step on the platform to go up, something shiny caught Kirito's eye. Moonlight reflecting off of a fancy armor. Just when Alice realized the implication, a brand new knight jumped down from the hole left by the platform and using the superhero landing to absorb the force. Too soon, Alice exclaimed as Kirito came eye to eye with Eugeo Synthesis 32. For Alice, it had taken 3 days and nights because she refused to chant the command, but even for regular nights, even for the normal process, this was way too quick. Eugeo had just fought Berkuli merely hours ago. But as I hinted at last week, Eugeo's synthesis ritual was an abnormal case as well, as by the time he had woken up, the major work of a synthesis ritual was already complete. I won't tell you what it is, you can go back to the previous video and check it out and guess for yourself, but the explanation is gonna come in 1 or 2 episodes. But keeping his icy cold stare throughout the entire scene, Kirito realized a rare showcase of emotion in the knight's eyes when he mentioned Alice's name, but it was quickly hidden by the blue knight again. With Eugeo taking back his weapon by using incarnate arms, another thing that should not have been possible for a mere newly synthesized knight. Eugeo raised his sword without responding to Kirito's attempts at reaching him. The blue rose sword shone a bright green light that Kirito recognized as the one-hit leaping sword skill, Sonic Leap. A small hope ignited inside Kirito. The knight who didn't even remember his name still did remember the sword skills Kirito had taught him. So there was something there that remained from the real Eugeo, his real partner. Much like a person who had passed away just mere weeks ago in real life, one idea had taken shape in Kirito's mind. The one thing he could share with Eugeo, he could only convey by fighting. Kirito returned the gesture the same way, leading the black one to glow green, and only a second after, both swordsmen lunged off the ground with Sonic Leap pushing them towards each other. But that brings us to the end of this episode. Overall, pretty damn good. I would have preferred if they showcased the filth of the senator scene. It would drive the point home a little better, especially with Alice wanting to kill them so they don't need to suffer, and even Kirito doubting his choice of letting them live. You know, the anime made it look like they were just there, soulless beings working like a machine in their pod. Actually, I can say that on all 3 instances that I talked about today, the senator scene, the dual blade scene back at the bath, and Kirito's and Eugeo's confrontation, all 3 scenes could have benefited immensely from 1 or 2 minor looking additional lines to provide a whole lot more depth and context. But then again, if the anime was 100% accurate, then what would I be doing every single week? Clickbaiting you like Foxen? Probably not, that's just too unethical. I'd probably just play Destiny or something, or, you know, get better grades at the university so close to graduation. But next episode is titled The 32nd Night, and well, you already know what's coming since we stopped at the same cliffhanger as Volume 13 itself. I really love the fact that the cliffhanger was not the cliche, oh it's Eugeo but a knight, dun dun dun, but rather uses that reveal to actually get you interested after a heavy exposition episode, provides a dialogue between the 2 main characters, and then cuts off when the battle actually starts that you knew was already coming since last week. The cut at the reveal would be too expected, and I'm glad the anime trusted the cliffhanger of the novels instead of doing the cliche version. Wasn't this bit supposed to be in my episode opinion section? Anyways, yeah, next week as we start with the contents of Sword Art Online Volume 14, Alicization Uniting, we're gonna dive deeper into Synthesis 32, and you can expect an exciting battle as well as some more stuff as the administrator awaits the result of the battle on the floor above. But if you made it this far, you know what to comment at this point. Time for Alicization Uniting is your phrase to let me know you made it this far into the video. Remember that the Sword Art Online Girls Ops giveaway is continuing, and you can get everything related to SAO through the Amazon and Book Depository affiliate links below. Thank you very much for watching, and a huge thanks to my patrons and channel members as well. Also a warm welcome to my newest patron, Imperator Zarathustra. I'll see you all soon with my weekly Alicization Q&A video, and until then, stay cool.